Hey guys, this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline, and today I'm doing Comic Uno episode 135, and this is a show where I review all the comics I read this week in one show. So we go worst pick of the week to best pick of the week, and this week we have 23 books, so let's get started. Number 23 is The Coming of the Supermen, issue 1. Now, this is a book I kind of got on a whim because it was a Superman miniseries. I've been enjoying most of them so far. I've been liking Lois and Clark. I've been loving American Alien, so I was just like, why not pick up this one? And this just was not for me. I felt like I was jumping into a middle of a story. Like, who the hell are all these Supermen? I don't know. And then, you know, it kind of, I don't want to say it got political, but it focused a bit on our Superman, and we see more of like the media side. You see a lot of like Lois' commentary on things, and yeah, I wasn't feeling this book. I didn't really like it. I didn't really understand why there were all these Supermen out there. I guess the artwork was kind of cool and nostalgic to older times for a Superman story, but yeah, this just didn't hook me as much as I wanted to. So The Coming of Superman issue 1 just wasn't my thing. I gave that 2 stars. Alright, so moving on to number 22, which is another thing that was not my thing this week, and that was Grayson issue 17. I think I'm going to officially drop this book once again. I gave it a good try. You know, I like Grayson when he is in Gotham. I've said this a lot. That is where the series is at its best. I'm just not really enjoying the espionage story, and I think it's because I just jumped into the series again. I'm not really totally, not grasping, but not totally invested in the story with Helena Bertinelli and Spiral. And then you have some interesting, I guess, guest stars of people I don't care about, like Grifter in this issue, Checkmate. A lot of people I just didn't care about in this issue. So yeah, still not really caring about Grayson, so I gave that 2 stars. Even the artwork kind of felt a little sloppier than usual. And usually the artwork's really well done for the series, so I gave this 2 stars, and I'm probably going to be dropping Grayson. Moving on to number 21, a book I was actually really looking forward to that I just did not feel invested in, and that was Wyonna Earp, issue 1. So this is actually going to be a sci-fi television show, and I like to give a chance to these sci-fi shows. Some of them are really good, like The Magicians, I'm a little behind on, but I've been really enjoying. Obviously, Bitten, I really like. Being Human was a really great show, so I try to give the sci-fi shows a try, and I heard this is getting a comic book, so I was like, oh, why not? It's based on a show, and you know how much I love television, so I picked it up, and I liked the character, I guess, of the sheriff, who's the main character of Wyonna Earp. And, you know, she defeats vampires, and you kind of, like, I feel like this is another series, you jump into the world, and they don't really explain the world very well, that you feel invested at all. And, you know, again, the character had some interesting, like, one-liners, which made her a little interesting and, I guess, sarcastic, but I did not feel invested to the story at all, and when I finished reading it, I'm like, alright, I don't really care to pick up the next issue, even though the artwork was pretty well done. I like kind of this cartoonier look, and I thought it was very neat looking, but the story overall was long and it is uninteresting to me. So I gave that 2 stars, and that was number 21. Moving on to number, I think, 20. I want to make sure what grade I gave it before I announce which one it is. And that is number 20, and I gave that to Deathstroke issue 15, and I feel like I'm gonna sneeze. Nope, it passed, okay. But yeah, Deathstroke issue 15. And for me, I've just been totally bored with this book, and I feel like it's gone nowhere since like issue maybe 6, since the ending of the first arc, because it's all about let me save Rose. And Rose, if you know Rose Wilson from Pre-Nuke 2, feels so out of character here. She's just like, she loves her father, and I feel like Rose always had a relationship with her father. She realized that she shouldn't have liked her father, and she was very brainwashed by her father, and they're not showing that at all here. It's just Deathstroke wanting to get his daughter. It's the same story over and over again of him going through some action sequence to try to get his daughter, and something brings him into a situation where he feels even farther away from getting his daughter. And this time, it is a guest appearance from somebody. Again, something that you see in Deathstroke every single issue, because I don't know why they think that Deathstroke can't sell his own book, but of course it has to have another guest star from probably a Batman book, and that was Red Hood in this issue. So I just feel like this book is way too formulaic, and the artwork has, you know, kind of decreased and just decreased in general also. So I gave this 2 stars. I am reading this digitally at the point. I'm not invested enough to pick it up printed, but I've been reading this book for such a long time, I kind of want to see it through and see what happens to Rose Wilson, but did not like this issue. I gave it 2 stars. Now it's number 20. Now we're moving on to number 19. Which is actually a book, if you watch Frontline Live, it was in my top 3 most anticipated, and obviously was disappointed with this issue, and that was Oz No Place Like Home, issue 1. Now, I've never really read the Oz books from Zenescope, and I thought this would be a good jumping on point, and it totally wasn't. We learn a little bit about Dorothy. She's in this carnival, and you see that she has a past with Oz, and then they introduce all these other characters, too. And I felt like this issue was just way too crowded of characters I just was not invested in because I don't know anything about Oz. So it was not a good introduction for new readers, as I think a one-shot should be like this. But I guess the interesting aspect was seeing Dorothy in Kansas and not in the Oz world. And I guess it also sells you on getting the other Oz books. Like, oh, if you want to learn more about Dorothy, read the Oz trilogy, which I don't know where to pick that up. But I was trying to looking up, and it seems like they have some trades of that. But yeah, I was a little disappointed with this. I thought this would be a bit more new reader friendly, and it was very much in its own world and had a lot of history, it seemed like, behind it. So I gave this 2.5, but I will say the artwork was really gorgeous, and I enjoyed that. Alright, moving on to number 18, which is a book from Zenescope I was also disappointed from, and that is Red Agent issue 2. Now, if you guys don't know, my favorite character from Zenescope is Red Riding Hood. I love, you know, werewolf type characters. And we have Brittany, who is a werewolf, who's like a secret agent. And Brittany was not in this book enough. It's her series, and she was hardly in this issue. They focus on more of, you know, this other group of people, and then this guy who hooks himself into the computer. It's a little weird for me, and as much as I like the scenes where we actually see some cool action in the beginning, it takes a really long time to actually get back to Brittany's story, and I think this book is kind of all over the place with the actual plot. Artwork's good though, but I want more Brittany. This is actually her miniseries, and I don't think we've seen enough of her. So I gave that 2.5 stars, and that was number 18, I think. So now we're moving on to number 17, which is Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur issue 4. A book that I was really excited to read when it first was announced because it seemed fun. But I've been disappointed ever since because I don't really like Lunella as a main character. She just kind of screams a lot throughout the issue, and she's kind of a hard character to be likable and hard character to feel attached to. And we're up to issue 4 already, and you're not really seeing the relationship as much as you would like to with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. And then you also introduce, as a guest star, Totally Awesome Hulk, which is Armistice Cho, and he's one of the smartest guys on the planet, and it doesn't really seem that way. He just kind of mentions it in the issue, but I guess that also goes to Totally Awesome Hulk, that he doesn't really seem like the smartest guy on the planet either, but I feel like it would have been more interesting dynamic to see that Lunella's a really smart person, he's a really smart person. Why don't they interact a little bit better here? It wasn't a horrible interaction, but I just expected more from that. But yeah, again, it goes back to Lunella not being likable enough. She's just kind of shouting throughout the whole issue and not wanting to be an Inhuman. It felt very repetitive of what we've seen, and I really want to see this series improve. I'll keep picking up printed for a little while, but I might switch to digital soon with Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur. So I gave that 3 stars, and that was number 17. Moving on to number 16, which is Postal, issue 10. Now, this is a book I feel like is a little forgettable from Image, but it gives me enough, and actually, Postal, I just want to make sure I gave it the right grade. Yes. Anyways, it's a book that I'm invested in enough to, see what happens next, I guess, and, book I read digitally. In this issue, it was a little forgettable. it introduces this, or I mean, we've seen this character already, but it continues to find out more about this the psychopath type character who is now a new character in the town and doesn't like Maggie and wants to hook up with our main character. And you totally don't know her motives, but she just wasn't as interesting as I wanted her to be in this issue. So it just felt like a middle ground book. Definitely my favorite part of the issue was the cliffhanger with Maggie being beaten and finding out what's going to happen to her in the next issue. But yeah, I just didn't feel as attached to this issue. So Postal, issue 10, gets 3 stars, and that is number 16. Moving on to number 15, which is Justice League, issue 48. A book I feel like that hasn't really progressed too much, and that's why it's this low. I'm getting a little frustrated with the title, that we're up to part 8, and again, like, there's a lot that kind of pretends to happen here, but not a lot of actual story progression. We have a cliffhanger that Superwoman's finally going to give birth, finally. Steve Trevor might become a god, but the rest of it is just like more battles, it seems like, from the Crime Syndicate, from, you know, Anti-Monitor. It's more of those fights, and then, you know, seeing Jessica Cruz as the evil, you know, power ring, which I'm sure she's actually going to get the Green Lantern ring by the end of this arc. But yeah, I just kind of wanted more to happen here, especially because this book tends to be a little delayed. And artwork's beautiful though, but a little frustrated with the story. I wanted to progress a bit more. So Justice League issue 48 gets 3 stars. That's number 16, I think. Oh, that was number 15. So moving on to number 14, which is Batman and Robin Eternal, issue 21. So this is definitely more an exposition issue. It's finding out who is Mother. And you have this whole story of, like, why Mother is the way she is. And I will say this was close to 3.5 stars. I mean, it was an interesting story, but at the same time, it was very exposition heavy. Just like, let me explain this whole story in this one issue. So that's the part I didn't really enjoy as much, but hopefully it'll bring us to an interesting story in the next issue with Harper Row and her being like the actual real Robin, or the one who should have been Robin, or whatever, with the whole Mother story. So Batman and Robin Eternal issue 21 gets 3 stars, and we'll see that the story is really ending soon. So hopefully we get to see the ending be good. We'll find out. Alright, so moving on to number 13, which is All New X-Men issue 5. And I thought this issue was not as good as the last issue. I really enjoyed the last issue because it finally just focused on one thing. But here I thought they focused on too many story elements. You had Iceman, who wants to, you know, date this guy in Paris. And then Edie dealing with her Christianity and, like, you know, does she kind of believe in God? Or, well, she still believes in God, but she's angry at God at this moment. And also everything that was happening with Laura in the last issue, that she obviously is, she can't die, but Angel can't handle her putting herself in danger. And the cliffhanger is that Angel actually breaks up with Laura in the end. And I think that's the most interesting story, is with Laura and Angel in this issue. Even though it didn't have a lot of pages, it's the story I was most invested in. And then I also enjoyed the Edie story. I thought that was interesting, that, you know, losing kind of her faith in God, and seeing that type of story. I thought that was interesting. There's actually a couple of, I guess, godlike stories with this week, which I'll talk about another one this week. But yeah, I felt like this was a bit too scattered, and I liked when they focused on one character a bit more, but I still do think this is the best X-Men book out there. I mean, that's not saying much because Extraordinary X-Men has been a little weak, and I dropped Uncanny X-Men, and if we're talking, I'm not counting All New Wolverine, because I mean, I know that's an X-Men book, but it's not a Team X-Men book. But I think All New X-Men is the best Team X-Men book out right now. I gave this 3.5 stars. It wasn't a bad read, but I did like the last issue a bit more. Alright, so now we're moving on to number 12, which is Dark Knight 3, The Master Race, issue, or book 3. In this book, I definitely liked the beginning of the issue a lot, with Batman and Carrie Kelly, and really Batman telling, or in his mind, in his monologue, that Carrie Kelly is kind of better than him, and I thought that was interesting. That was a very interesting monologue. And then, you know, they break out Superman and try to defeat these these other Kryptonians. And the villains are the parts I really don't really care about with the book. I'm like, alright, whatever, you know, all these Kryptonians wanting to fight. I do like the aspect of the commentary on technology and politics and how people don't listen to the news as much as they should. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I mean, the best part's definitely being the monologue in the beginning with Batman and Carrie Kelly, and then Superman returning. So Dark Knight 3, The Master Race Book 3 gets 3.5 stars. And that was number 12, I think? Yes, that was number 12. So moving on to number 11, which is Venus, issue 3. And I like this book. The artwork is really good. I like how clean the artwork is. And what I liked about this issue is that it's the crew kind of going against the captain and actually trying to sabotage her, saying that she wasn't capable of holding up the ship and almost destroys their food supply. So now you're seeing this sabotage throughout the ship and seeing what exactly the captain will do about that. But the best part of this book was definitely the artwork. Really liked it. There's this scene where we see the captain kind of beat up on somebody and like pokes his eyes out, and I thought that was a really fun scene. But yeah, it was interesting, and I like Venus for the most part. I think it's an intriguing premise and has an interesting main character. So Venus issue 3 gets 3.5 stars. Alright, so that was number 11. Moving on to number 10, which is Superman, Lois and Clark, issue 5. In this book, you know, the parts obviously I like the most here is Lois and Clark and the family aspect. Lois being worried about Intergang and all of that. Also trying to find out what to do with their son to finally reveal to their son that Clark is Superman. The parts I don't really like in the issue, though, are Hank Henshaw's story, and it does take up a lot of the issue. And then even though the beginning with Batman of, you know, Superman explaining why he wanted to tell the New 52 Batman that he was Superman, or Superman of another world, and tell the truth, and then Lois saying, you need a friend. You really do need to get a friend. And even though I don't really know why that story fit this issue, and that's why it's a little lower, I still enjoyed that scene. And again, the best parts being the Lois and Clark scenes and seeing their chemistry and seeing a bit of John in this issue. But why it's lower is the out-of-place Batman story and also the Hank Henshaw story, which I just don't care about. But artwork is really great. Love the facial expressions here. And it just fits the story really well. So love the clean artwork. And it also, even in the opening, Batman looked great too. So love the artwork. So Lois and Clark issue 5 gets 3.5 stars, and that is number 10. Moving on to number 9, which is Silk issue 5. Now with this book, it doesn't really, it progresses the story, but it takes a little while to. It's mostly Silk being, you know, under Green Goblin's or the Goblin Nation's influence and not really being Silk. And her friends being worried, like Mockingbird saying, where the hell is she? And Jessica's being like, we were supposed to have brunch. Where is she? And then we do get to see that this is all kind of a test. And Black Cat says, yeah, I trust you now. And now she's like kind of officially part of the team by the end of the issue. So yeah, it was a fun issue. Again, it's not the best issue of Silk, but at least by the end of the issue, you're like, oh, finally, you know, she's in with Black Cat now. So I like that. I also like seeing some of the outside stuff. My favorite scene, honestly, being with J. Jonah Jameson, where he worries about her and says, oh, where's Cindy? Like, she's not here. And then they say, oh, it seems like she's working on a story. And then he goes, like, kind of all, you know, J. Jonah Jameson, like, oh, of course, well, she needs a story by the end of the week. I just want to make sure she's okay. So I love, like, their friendship that's happening here. And I can't wait to see where that goes. It's honestly one of my favorite parts of this series, of J. Jonah Jameson. But yeah, Silk issue 5 gets 3.5 stars. I thought it was a pretty good issue, but I have read better issues. But I do think it's getting to a point where we're going to see some more progression in the story. Alright, now we're moving on to number 8. And that is Astonishing Ant Man, issue 5. In this issue, I will say it's wordy, and there's times where it kind of has some lulls in the issue, but there's a lot of fun aspects of the issue too. Learning a little bit more about the Giant Man and seeing an awesome montage with him and Scott in like a Lego setting. Thought that was really cool. And the cliffhanger. We get an awesome cliffhanger in this issue where we see Cassie is signing up to be a supervillain. And I was like, whoa, that actually makes a lot of sense. And especially with the way she's feeling with her father. And I'm excited for, obviously, the centric issue with Cassie in issue 6 to see what she does and why she wants to be a villain. Which I think we all know why she wants to be a villain. But I think she just doesn't know what to do with her life. And she's angry at her father. And she can't be a hero anymore. So why not be a villain? I'm really excited about that. And yeah, even though I'm not saying that this issue made me love Giant Man, there were some fun aspects with him and Scott. The lulls were definitely the app and like the over-explaining of the app, and some of the villain talk could have been a little bit more interesting. But overall, I enjoyed the issue, and I like the idea of where the app's going, that anyone could be a supervillain. And now you're seeing someone really close to Scott become a supervillain. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, Astonishing Ant Man issue 5 gets 3.5 stars. And that's number 8. Moving on to number 7, which is Patsy Walker, aka Hellcat, issue 3. And this issue was fun. I'm not saying it's the best issue of even this series, but I like that we get to see that Patsy's dealing with these bed bugs, and she finds out they're magical bed bugs, and they're from her horrible landlord, but also created by the cute son that the landlord has. And by the end of the issue, they figure out the whole bedbug situation. And actually, Patsy finds a way for the landlord's son to actually get a job and use his magical bug power to help people in New York City with their bedbug problems. So, it was fun. It was kind of fillerish. It was totally fillerish. But the cliffhanger could have been better with Hetty. But overall, I had a fun time. It was cool seeing this whole bedbug situation and seeing another person get a job with their, you think, useless powers. And he ends up being like exterminator for New York City, which I thought was a cool job. So, yeah, it's not a perfect issue of Patsy Walker, but I still had a fun time with it. And I gave that 3.5 stars. Now it's number 7. Moving on to number 6, this has been the highest this series has been, and that is All New, All Different Avengers, issue 6. This book definitely improved a lot with this issue. The artwork improved. I can show you a little bit of that. I thought that improved a lot in the issue. Still not flagship material, but it's a big improvement. And then the character development, or the character interactions improved. They didn't feel out of character here. Even though Vision kind of gets his emotions back in this issue, I'm curious how that's going to play out in his actual series and in other titles. Still like that his emotions were back. Thought that was interesting. The least interesting part was probably the fight with Kang. I think that could have been more interesting. But the best part of the issue is definitely Thor and Captain America. Captain America finds out that Jane Foster's Thor, and I love his reaction. And my favorite part being the ending, where he actually goes to Jane, and Jane says, "You'll keep this secret, right?" He's like, "Yeah, I will, but why?" Because she says, "It's important to me." And then he says, "Well, why is it important to you?" And I'm excited for the next issue to see why it's so important for her to keep this secret and tell Captain America. So I really enjoyed their relationship, and that's where it's not forced. Like, that kiss was so forced in the past issues, but here you see kind of this build-up of their relationship a bit more, if they want to go a romantic subplot way, but at least we're seeing that friendship being established here in this issue. So, All New, All Different Avengers issue 6 was a big improvement, and I gave that 4 stars. Moving on to number 5, which is just a fun book, and that was X-Men, Worst X-Man Ever, issue 1. And this was fun because this guy, our main character, just, his luck is horrible. The whole beginning of the issue is that he just wants to find a date for prom, and he's not geeky enough to find one, and he's not popular enough. He's just like kind of this wallflower character. And then he goes home and he finds out he's a mutant because his parents were mutants. And his parents says, hey, I had X-ray vision. Your father could make an egg on his chest. And you might have power. So he goes to the Xavier school and he finds out that his power is to explode. And he's like, yes, that's awesome. And he's like, no, it's not so. And Beast is like, it's not so awesome because you don't come back together. If you explode, you die. It's like, well, that sucks. And then he's walking out. He's like, all right, whatever. You know, I didn't know I was a mutant before. His parents get crushed by a sentinel. So now his parents are dead. And he has to go to Xavier school. And he has no powers. But everyone's nice to him because they feel really bad for him. And by the end of the issue, he actually gets this robot suit, which I'm sure will not work out for him. But it's going to be fun why it doesn't work out for him. And this is such a funny, fun book, and it's kind of really dark comedy, as you can tell. But I like that this guy just doesn't have a lot of luck. You know, he really is the worst X-Man ever. Honestly, I could see the cliffhanger being that he has to use his powers to explode, and then he ends up dying. I could totally see that being the last issue. But what I liked about this issue is that it felt original, you know, especially with a lot of the X-Men team books kind of feeling like the same thing we've seen before the X-Men. Here we get this kind of original plot, even a plot where you see mutants that have not really joined the X-Men or are kind of friends with the X-Men, but they didn't join that team. They just wanted to be regular people, and I haven't seen that with an X-Men type title in a while. Probably the last time I saw it was with Dazzler in like the 1980s. That series was kind of focused on her not being an X-Men and instead wanting to do her music career. And that's one of the reasons I really like Dazzler. But, and in that series. But yeah, I like that this felt original and fun. And I gave X-Men Worst X-Man Ever, issue 1, 4 stars. And that is number 5. Now we're moving on to number 4. Which is Outcast, issue 16. It made my top 5 again. The series has been a big improvement. And the opening scene with Kyle explaining to his wife that his daughter might have these powers too, to do exorcisms with these demons. The wife is like, you're crazy. We are so close to, at least having a good relationship, and then you bring this demon shit, And then Megan comes in and says, no, I think it's true, because that happened to me. And now the wife is obviously going to have to think about it. Now, the part that, could have, it felt a little bit more like, oh, we've seen this before. They do another exorcism, but Kyle in the end of the issue almost gets beaten up. Really does get beaten up. Almost dies because he gets beaten up. So that was kind of a cool cliffhanger. But why it's this high, the artwork is gorgeous for this book, and I really love that opening scene between Kyle and his wife and his sister. Those are definitely the best parts of the book, is when we bring in the family involvement, and less of the exorcism involvement. But Outcast issue 16 gets 4 stars. I thought this was a very solid issue, and that was number 4. Moving on to number 3, which is Cry Havoc issue 2. I love this book. I know it's only up to issue 2, but I'm having a blast. And I love the dialogue of explaining. It's kind of meta, explaining how our minds kind of work. Our minds work where we need stories. And I love that opening. And the opening is actually the ending, because anytime you have red, it means it's the end of the story. When you have kind of the sand type color, it's the middle of the story when she's in Afghanistan, and then the blue color is like her origin story. And in the ending story, we see, our main character, turning in and out of a werewolf, and this evil person explaining why she's doing the things she's doing, and just, I love her really smart monologue about, people and about stories and why it's okay to be messed up. And then the end, the big cliffhanger is somehow our main character is pregnant. And, like, how does she get pregnant? Because she would obviously have to have a relationship with a guy, and she's a lesbian. So how are they going to deal with that? Like, I'm really curious of, like, how she got pregnant, and obviously we'll find out, hopefully in future issues. And then in the beginning story, we're seeing that her main character is, trying to get used to being a werewolf. She's, like, eating cats. And then she meets somebody that actually knows a bit about werewolves. My favorite scene in this whole issue is, where we see her girlfriends just fighting. It's like, why do you, like, just get a job? What are you doing? You made a mess of this apartment. And obviously we know why she made a mess, because she's a werewolf. But there's that awesome scene where she's like, just get a job. She closes the door in anger and just like, I love you, bye, get a job, and then closes the door again. So I thought that was such an interesting scene. And I'm curious to see where that relationship goes, because we don't see that character in the future. And then we have, I guess, I would say this is more the least interesting story, the Afghanistan story of, like, seeing all these monsters work together, and, you know, her getting used to, you know, being a monster. It seems like she's kind of accepted at this point. And that's the whole issue. It's definitely an interesting story with a lot of great scenes in the issue, and I love how they break it up. I love that they're doing this beginning, middle, end all at once, because I feel like in stories sometimes when you have them all out, you have it, you know, all released, like Netflix or something. You're always a little tempted to find out what happens in the end, but you don't want to be spoiled. And I feel like this is a perfect book where obviously they're not going to really spoil stuff for you, but you could find out where this character ends up, and I think that's so awesome. So Cry Havoc issue 2 gets 4 stars. I thought this was a very solid book, and I'm really enjoying this book. As a werewolf fan and as a story fan, I think this is a really interesting, interesting title. So that's number 3. Moving on to number 2, which is Spider-Man 2099 issue 7. And this continues this Inhuman storyline, where we get to see that this Inhuman, the one that used to work for Miguel, actually thinks she's a god. And I really liked her, you know, her discussion between Miguel, why she believes she's a god and why she believes God doesn't, the Catholicism God does not answer people's prayers and why he's not real. And I like Miguel because he's obviously an atheist, so it's like his point of view and then her point of view, and then you have even Roberta's point of view, who is Catholic, and you get all these different religious points of views in the book. And then also you get to see her girlfriend return and try to help her out, and she gets stabbed by like this metal thing. So I'm really curious to see where this character goes. And it's an Inhuman character that I feel like we haven't really seen. And obviously it's built up from Miguel's story and his supporting cast, making the supporting cast more interesting and having more layers, especially Roberta, who I love, and Captain America's like, you have to turn into Captain America, and she doesn't because one of her co-workers comes in. So I thought this was a really interesting issue, and I gave it 4 stars. Thought it was very interesting. That was number 2. So what is Pick of the Week? What was number 1? Number 1 was Black Magick, issue 5, and I'm so sad that this is the last issue for the arc, so we have to wait until July for the next issue. But I love this book. I mean, just look at this gorgeous artwork, the facial expressions, also when we actually get to see some color, I'll show you that. Oh my god, this is just such a gorgeous page over here. It's just such a beautiful book. And here, I will say some of the negatives would be the main villain. There's not a lot of information about them. It's like, we need to get Ro. We need to get this person. And that's kind of how the issue ends. And I kind of wanted a bigger cliffhanger than that, but to get even more excited for that July issue. But maybe I'm happy that we, you know, the wait might be a little bit more tolerable, that we didn't have a huge cliffhanger. But the parts there are definitely interesting. The middle with the fight between this magical being from the black magic that the head of her group pretty much created to try to help Ro. And now we're seeing that this creature's targeting Ro, and it all adds up to whoever's targeting Ro in the first place. Another aspect I really liked about this issue was the beginning, where we get to see Ro, we finally get to meet Ro's partner's wife, who's been talked about since the first issue, and she's pregnant, and you see that they're all really good friends, and I love that aspect, because usually with a partner, you know, 2 cops, you always see, oh my god, they're gonna be love interests, but I like that they're not. They're just friends, and the wife is friends with her too, and I like the dialogue where it, you know, they talk shop or whatever, and she's like, no, we're not talking shop. She's my friend too. We're not going to talk about your job. She already is a great character, so I like that they introduced her, and I'm really curious of what him and the wife have to do with the magical story, because you know it's going to add up to something. I think the husband's going to find out more about magic and want to do everything in his power to help Ro, and somehow get hurt because of it. whatever. I think it's going to really surprise us, where that story goes. But really enjoyed this issue. I gave it 4 stars. That was my pick of the week, and I can't wait to read the next arc for Black Magick. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. This is Comic Uno. Let me know in the comments below what was your worst pick of the week and best pick of the week, and everything in between. Let me know in the comments. So this is Comic Uno and Comic Frontline. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter. Don't forget to like my Facebook page. Also, description below, there's links for my comic book, Like Father, Like Daughter. And don't forget to like the Facebook page of Like Father, Like Daughter. I'll see you guys later.